Good morrow, lovely little ghosts, and welcome to the Dark Orchard for Lara Watson's 13 Days of Vlogoween.
As I said in my intro, this is a Vlogoween video. More specifically, a discussion about Hocus Pocus 2. Yes, this year's Vlogoween does have an emphasis on Tim Burton-esque films, and in my opinion, Hocus Pocus fits in that realm. At least, the original does. It has the bright coloration and the quippiness about it, but also having dark undertones, so I was really excited for Hocus Pocus 2, and now seemed like the perfect time to discuss it. It's been out a couple of weeks now, so I feel free to talk freely about it without there being spoilers. But that being said, if you have not seen Hocus Pocus 2 yet, I suggest you watch that before watching this video, because I will be talking about the entire film and spoiling things. So without further delay, let's get started. Let's talk about Hocus Pocus 2. But we can't talk about Hocus Pocus 2 without talking about the original Hocus Pocus and what led us to a sequel 29 years in the making. So with the original Hocus Pocus, we fell in love with the characters and the location and the theming, and there was so much depth to the film while still being a fun, campy Disney flick. The thing that draws me most to the original Hocus Pocus is that it wasn't necessarily made for kids. Like, it wasn't like, this is going to be a kids movie. It was more made for anyone. It had a lot of things that some kids might even be scared of. It deals with some pretty grim things, like the speed bump scenes. And I don't know, there's just like a little bit of darkness to it that made it more than just a kids movie. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say that I don't feel like they went that direction with the new one. They definitely went the direction of kids need to watch this and not be traumatized, versus the first movie where it was like, let them have a little trauma. I remember being totally captivated by this entire movie. Like, the original Hocus Pocus captivated me like no other movie ever. It was a must watch. It was always my favorite. I had it on VHS. I was recalling this the other day talking to my mother. I had one of my first boyfriends over, and we were in the same room, and I had a VHS player in my room, and I didn't have any seating. I just had my bed, and it was like a little day bed that was in the middle of the room. And we were sitting on my bed, and I was like, let's watch one of my favorite movies ever, which was Hocus Pocus. So I put it in, and all of a sudden I realized how many times they say virgin in that movie. And it was so awkward because little preteen me was sitting there watching my favorite movie and finally realizing how adult some of the things were in it. And it's so funny because the new Hocus Pocus 2 addresses that exact topic.
What's a virgin?
That is a person who has never lit a candle.
So that was something that I found really entertaining about the new movie, because they did not want to address that topic in this movie. With the original Hocus Pocus, we really had time to fall in love with each of the characters, starting from the very moment that Thackeray Binks sits up in bed. From that moment, we get instant plot points. We know exactly what's going on. He's the older brother, he's missing his sister, he's gonna go find his sister, and we get attached to that character within the first 10 minutes of the movie. Within the first 5 minutes of the movie. And everything from that first moment to the moment that Danny dramatically lays across the hay and starts crying, to Jay and Ice in the cages at the very end. Like, everything about this movie drew out your emotions and had so much to give. Hocus Pocus became like this Halloween fantasy for so many of us. Like, when you think Halloween, you think Hocus Pocus. So of course, with the announcement of a sequel, people had really mixed emotions. Especially since the first movie had a lot of awakenings for a lot of people. I remember thinking that it had just like the cutest cast ever, from Thackeray and Max and Allison and Sarah. Like, they were just all so cute. I'd love to know what like a preteen/teen thinks about the cast of this one, because of course the Sanderson sisters are older, so do they see them as like older characters, or are they still infatuated with Sarah, Winifred, and Mary? Like, I'd like to know, because with the original, I was in love with the entire cast. So with that being said, let's talk about Hocus Pocus 2. So with Hocus Pocus 2, the opening was absolutely everything I could have hoped for in a sequel, in a prequel. And I do say prequel because the beginning was a prequel to the Sanderson sisters, just like the Thackeray and Emily scenes in the first movie, to fill in some blanks with the Sanderson sisters. I loved the added backstory. I instantly wanted more. I loved how they explained how the Sanderson sisters were banished. I really enjoyed the cute little glimpse of little human child Billy Butcherson. Like, that was so adorable. And it really made me kind of desperate for more of them, like, as teenagers, and then growing into the Sanderson sisters. Like, that would have been really fun to know more of that, like, to see that storyline play out. But they did what they could, and that part was amazing. I'm actually tempted to watch the beginning of Hocus Pocus 2, then watch all of Hocus Pocus, and then watch the rest of Hocus Pocus 2. Even though there's a lot of time skipped between the prequel scene with Winifred and Sarah and Mary and the opening to Hocus Pocus, I still think it would be really fun to watch it that way. There were so many Easter eggs just in the opening. I love how they had Sarah gift Winifred a spider because, of course, she likes spiders, and the scene with the fireman where she ate the spider, like, that was really cute. And they added spiders to her costume. So the new Sarah Sanderson sleeves have spider webs. And her bodice has little spiders hidden in it, which I thought was a really cute caveat. Some people are a little upset about the next thing I'm going to talk about, so I'm going to talk a little bit deeper into it than I might have otherwise. They introduced a new character. And this character is a mother witch who is trying to draw children in using the same song and the same potion that we were accustomed to in Hocus Pocus. It's the same green liquid. The way they took the mother witch, I was like, they're gonna do it right. They're gonna be like, witches aren't a bad thing. And they're gonna, like, have Salem be Salem and be like, oh, this was a bad thing that happened all these years ago, but witches aren't that bad, and maybe you should stop trying to kill children. And I don't know, I thought it was going to go that way. Like, I thought it was going to be like, we have whole shops devoted to crystals and, like, all this white witch, pure witch magic, and maybe dabble in that. Like, that's the direction I thought it was going to go. Maybe that would have been too cheesy or too realistic, but that's where I thought it was going when they introduced literal Hecate. So I was really hoping for, like, the modern witch backbone for the film. It didn't happen, but I was hoping for it. So the reason people are upset is because the mother witch is the one that gives Winifred the book. The main spell book that we all know from Hocus Pocus, the one with the eyeball. The mother witch gives her that. So in the original Hocus Pocus, it is said, rumored, that Winifred was gifted the book by the devil himself. Not confirmed, rumored, on plaques in the museum, that kind of thing. So it's not a fact. It's not. There's a lot of first movie worship happening in the second movie. Like, a lot. Even with opening scenes, we see a school setting, and there was a school setting in the opening scene for the modern times back in the 90s. And there's just so many things in this film that just are a kiss to the old one. We meet our three main characters pretty quickly. There's Becca, Izzy and Cassie. And I want to call her Becky because Becky, Izzy, Cassie, it sounds better to me. But Becca, Izzy, and Cassie. And they themselves are a subtle kiss to the Sanderson sisters and also to other characters. They don't dress in costume. Instead, they're basically Disney bounding as the Sanderson sisters. Cassie also wears a cardigan like Allison and a tie-dyed shirt like Max. While we're talking about Cassie, her dad's the mayor, and on the billboard behind them is the Dennison house. Out of the three, Izzy was my favorite, which makes sense because Mary was my favorite of the Sanderson sisters, so it kind of fits. My favorite Izzy moment was when the black flame candle got lit, because I won't say they lit it because they didn't intentionally light it, but when that candle was lit and the ground started shaking and opening and Izzy goes, "Nope," and just scurries off. Ooh, favorite Izzy moment. Loved that. Thought it was so funny. But that being said, we didn't really get a chance to meet the characters before the adventure began. We kind of get introduced to them at the school, which is very parallel to Max giving Allison his number. And then we don't really get that get to know them scene in the middle, where we had like Max and Danny, and meeting Max and Danny's parents, and then Max and Danny trick-or-treating, and Jay and Ice bullying Max, and then the whole meeting Allison at her house, and them just getting to know each other before the Sanderson sisters arrive. With Hocus Pocus 2, it was like, we gotta go. We gotta get this rolling. And we didn't get to know Becca, Izzy, and Cassie very much before the whole movie starts. Before the Sanderson sisters arrive, and it's all about them. There was a scene near the beginning while they're at the school where Becca scares Cassie's boyfriend by reciting vegan foods. And it's so funny. Like, this movie had me laughing for sure. Definitely had me laughing. Lots and lots of funny scenes. That being one of them. The Walgreens scene made me laugh a lot. This was actually a reprised scene from a deleted scene from the original, which I find hilarious. There's very minimal footage of the deleted scene from the original, but we do see Mary like downing some house products, and they just really elaborated on it for this. So the Walgreens scene, they're looking for souls, and Becca and Izzy have managed to convince them that there are souls in the beauty products at Walgreens. So the Sanderson sisters go in and they're eating face creams and face masks, and Mary says that it's the face of a child and takes a bite out of it and says it tastes like raspberry or something. Like, it's funny. It's really funny. And of course, if you've ever accidentally gotten like soap or shampoo into your mouth, you know that it actually doesn't taste good, but they sold it on how it tasted good to them, which makes sense because like Sarah eats spiders. Of course, she's going to have a different palate. Of course, they're going to have different palates than other people. But in the Walgreens scene, we also get to see Becca use magic for the first time. And it's by using salt, which is something that we saw the use of in the first film. She lays out salt, and there's actually a new glow to it that we didn't have in the first movie. Good use of those effects. It makes the fan theory about Allison being a witch even more prevalent. And it would make sense. So I'm definitely here for maybe Allison was a witch too. Especially if they're playing into Becca's a witch. But I like how they didn't deviate from the salt circle thing. So now it's time to talk about one of my favorite characters ever. We not only got to see a young Billy Butcherson, but Doug Jones himself returned for the role of Billy Butcherson. I love it. A lot of people are saying that his look was a little different, but he actually confirmed that the wig he was wearing is the exact same wig that he wore in the first film. That being said, his look is different, and I'll tell you how. The casual viewer may not have noticed this, but Billy's stitches were different in this film. Billy's stitches in this film say kiss. They kind of did in the first, but not quite. But in this one, it's an obvious kiss in his stitches. And I love it. The perfect design choice. Beautiful. Beautiful in so many ways. I like that we got a lot more Billy Butcherson screen time, and it was more than just a bunch of grunting. Like they let him have more personality and more of a presence in this film, which made me super happy because I loved that character back then. Love him now. Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Easter eggs for a minute. The Gary and Penny Marshall character, the Devil and Medusa, there are 2 references in this movie to those characters. The first is at the candy apple stand, there's someone dressed like them. And then the second, Winifred's looking in a window and sees Hocus Pocus playing on the TV, which opens so many questions, so many doors of questions, like an entire Versailles worth of doors of questions. How does Hocus Pocus the movie exist in Hocus Pocus 2? I have questions. But in addition to those, we also saw someone dressed like Madonna, which of course is a nod to Max's mother being dressed like Madonna. And then we see a bartender dressed like a skeleton with a top hat, which is a nod to the skeleton that was singing at the town hall dance. Sanderson sisters see a car and call it a very small bus, because the only thing that they have to compare it to is the bus that they rode in the first film. While Gilbert is explaining how he knows about the Sanderson sisters, he says boys stole his candy, and of course, that was Jay and Ice. And we get another reference to Jay and Ice from Mary when they're trying to recall the last time they saw the book, and Mary says the boys were in cages. Jay and Ice. Also, 2 amazing characters. And then in the magic shop that they actually called the magic shop, which was like, as a Buffy fan, was funny to me. At the magic shop, Cobweb, the black cat, the new black cat, jumps up in front of Sarah and she calls him the Binks boy. Of course, referencing Thackeray Binks. It's not even a talking cat, just a regular cat, probably a familiar, but definitely not Thackeray. But we do get that little reference. Dani's outfit, it looks like she was maybe dressed for Halloween as the Mother Witch, because the Mother Witch's costume has those same frills and the same coloration as Dani's costume. So perhaps, just like people dressed like the Sanderson sisters in this film, maybe Dani was dressed like the Mother Witch in that film. So in the film, we learn that Cassie's father is the mayor, and the mayor is a descendant of the person that banished the Sanderson sisters all those years ago. However, he's not what you would expect from a character that's descendant from a mean character. Instead, he's just a fun, bubbly dad, but he's a dad. So, like, when he hears that Cassie's having an unsupervised party, he does go into dad mode. But otherwise, he's just a really bubbly guy that wants a candied apple, which I think is really a really cute choice. Like, they didn't make the dad the bad guy. It was fun. It was cute, and it was fun. And then, probably my favorite thing about Hocus Pocus 2 is that Billy's entire mission this movie was to set the record straight that he wasn't Winifred's lover. He was with Sarah, and him and Winifred only kissed once when they were like 15. So it turns out that Winifred was just that jealous for that long, and Billy paid a bad price for it. Really, really like the stretch on his lore, and the fact that the whole time he's back, he's trying to correct that and make that right. Like, that was That was great. While we're talking about Billy, let's talk about the ending. Or at least his ending. Again, if you've made it this far and you're upset about spoilers, I'm sorry, but you were warned. So at the end of this film, Billy's curse is finally lifted, and it's about time because he's been awake since the 90s. 29 years just kind of in a box. That's creepy. But it makes you wonder, how was it different? Was it just like the ultimate curse lifting? So it was just like the ultimate release of powers, and that's why his soul was released, versus Thackeray's being released in the first film. Like, I kind of want to know what makes their curses different. So let's talk about my two things that I was like, about. The first is the musical number in this one. Of course, the Witch's Back was amazing. Loved that. Loved the take on the Elton John song. Thought that was a really cool thing. And of course, Bette Midler was just like, let me sing. And they did. But the Blondie song, they sang One Way or Another at the festival after the competition, which was really cool. Seeing people dressed like the Sanderson sisters and Mary being thrilled that they looked foxy. And I wasn't even mad that they knew the lyrics to the Blondie song, because they had heard I Put a Spell on You in the first movie and made up their own lyrics to go along with that. So the Blondie song, it made sense. What didn't make sense to me was the reason behind it. Like, I wasn't fully on board with the whole let us do this big power spell to start with. Like, the first movie, they had a goal, and it was all the children of Salem, we want to eat them. And that was their goal for the movie. For this movie, it was, we have to gather all these items and then do this spell in the forest. And it just felt it was very lackluster. It wasn't, I don't know, it didn't hit the same way. Like, there were no true stakes. The spell that they put on the townspeople, loved that they did a nod to the Thriller dance, and like, it was a really fun scene. But all they did was take his candy apple. Like, they found the mayor, and once they touched him, they took his candy apple, and that was it. It wasn't dance, dance, dance until you die. It was find this guy that's within your perimeter and touch him, and then you're done. Like, I don't know, it just, with the first movie, when they put the spell on the townspeople to dance, literally dance until they died. The whole second half of the movie happens, and then end credits, you see them stumbling out of town hall, having literally non-stop danced the whole half of the night. It was like, wow, good thing those kids took care of the witches, or their parents would have literally danced themselves to death. With this one, it was one way or another, I'm gonna find you, I find you, I take your apple, and now I go about my business. It was very short-lived. It was a very, very short-lived curse. I guess that's what made it kind of lackluster, is because it didn't have any consequences. And that was the thing with this movie. Like, there weren't any consequences to anything in this movie. This movie is just very Disney. Very, very new school Disney. It just didn't feel real. Like, the original movie, we see Max get actually bullied. Jay and Ice ask him for smokes. They make fun of where he's from. They take his shoes. They don't give them back. Like, they're legit bullies. They steal candy from all the kids in the neighborhood. They smash pumpkins. They're little punks. And that's part of their character. With this movie, we have a bully, but the bully is Cassie's boyfriend, and he's, as Winifred so eloquently put it, a village idiot. He admits that he makes fun of them, but then he plays stupid and says, Well, I didn't know that making fun of you was making fun of you. I thought we were just playing around. Just commit to him being a bully. He literally said he had a lot of people to apologize to. It was an episode of Girl Meets World. Like I said, it didn't have a lasting effect. Just like the spell on the townspeople didn't have a lasting effect. His bullying, I guess they just felt like they couldn't have the bully in the movie be the boyfriend of one of the girls. But in my opinion, that just makes sense. Like, that's just who he is. He was raised differently. He lives in Salem, but he thinks the whole witchcraft thing is weird. They just made him stupid. They made him a guy that was bullying because he didn't know he was bullying. And one thing that irked me the most while we're talking about the school and the bullying and all of that, one thing that irked me the absolute most was that none of the kids dressed up. Lots of the adults were dressed up, people at the festival were dressed up, but the main kids didn't dress up. And like, we got to see Allison in a cool costume, gorgeous costume, loved her in that costume. And then we got to see Danny in her costume the whole movie. Why were our teenagers not dressed up? I mean, I get it, they were Disney bounding, it's cute, but at the same time, give us costumes. Instead of kids having to fight witches or they will literally be murdered, Hocus Pocus 2 was about stopping witches that they accidentally summoned from becoming more powerful. Nothing that the kids actually did affected what the outcome was. Like, if the kids were not part of the film other than lighting the candle, like they lit the candle and then they just vanished, it would have still had the same outcome except for the very ending. But think about it. The candle's lit, the Sanderson sisters come back, they wreak havoc, they almost capture the mayor. Maybe they do, maybe they capture Cassie. They don't intend on killing him. They just need a drop of blood, which they got from Cassie. So it's kind of like a Barbossa thing. Just need a drop. And then Winifred does the spell, becomes all powerful. The sisters vanish, and she regrets it. To that point, we didn't need the other characters. We didn't need the new main characters at all. Becca, Izzy, Cassie, they really didn't matter until that moment. Until the last 20 minutes of the movie, when Becca, in her newfound witchcraft abilities, gets to send Winifred to her sisters. That's the only time that the main characters would have made a difference. Versus Max, Danny, Allison, and Binks actually stopping them. Like, Max risking his life. Thackeray literally sacrificing himself trying to save his sister. Like, the whole thing. And it just all had consequences. And they actually were the main characters. Versus the new movie where it was like all about the Sanderson sisters. Rightfully so. But then we had new characters introduced and it was kind of like, you don't need to be here. We're gonna put you in here, but you don't need to be here. Another favorite part of mine was from the Walgreens thing where, of course, Winifred has the broom, Sarah has a wet jet, and then Mary has Roombas, and she calls them Roomies, and she flies around on 2 Roombas, and it's absolutely adorable. That's probably one of my favorite moments in the whole film. It's an upgrade from the vacuum cleaner and mop that they used in the first film. It's a nice little caveat to that, but it's just funny. It's funny to see her surfing on the Roombas. And I really hope that Sarah Jessica Parker had just as much fun flying on the wet jet that she did when she was flying on the mop. Because the interviews of her talking about how she'd just like read the New York Times while sitting up on her mop in the harness was just like one of the best behind the scenes moments ever. So finally, let's talk fashion. I won't go into a lot of detail because I know this video is getting kind of long, but I've already talked about how they redid Sarah's costume. Let's talk a little bit about Winifred's, because I'm extremely impressed by the detail on Winifred's outfit. If you're like me and you're a cosplayer and you look at the details on costumes, you know that Winifred's original costume was basically a reverse dyed velvet, which is unheard of. You cannot reverse dye velvet because velvet, it doesn't bleach properly. So that designer in themselves was fantastic. But the new designers decided, let's not reverse dye. That's so 2000s, that's so 90s. Let's not reverse dye. Instead, let's embroider. And they embroidered. There are so many beautiful details on Winifred's new coat. I read a post by one of the designers that said they've had 29 years in purgatory for the minions of hell or whatever to make them new outfits. So of course they've got an upgrade. And that's just, that imagery makes me happy. Their clothes were disintegrated when they turned to dust. So of course they needed new outfits. I love that little something. That little behind the scenes that really gives the new outfits life and explains things. And yeah, I think it's really cool. So overall, it's nostalgic, and it's got a lot of callbacks to the original, which is what we needed it to be. We got a lot of Doug Jones content. He is the creature king. Anytime Doug Jones is on screen, it makes me happy. And the first thing I ever saw him in was Hocus Pocus as Billy Butcherson. And he always blows me away with his talents. So I'm super glad that we got to see more of Billy and a more playful side of Billy. Like, he really added a lot to the character this time, and that in itself is worth the sequel. So the very last thing I'm talking about is the Black Flame candle. At the very end, post credits, we see Cobweb the cat jump up on a shelf, and on that shelf is a Black Flame candle number 3. So does that mean that there will be a third movie? Are they thinking about a third movie? Have they already signed on for a third movie? Or is there going to be like a series with Becca, Izzy, and Cassie where we could have guest appearances by some of the original cast that wasn't in this film? I'd be happy with that. I'd be more than happy with that. So all in all, it was a sequel 29 years in the making. It was a sequel that was just a big old makeout session with the original. It was praise. It was an altar to the original. It was absolutely not its own movie, and that's okay. It was absolutely not the first movie, and that's okay. I've seen things that say better than the first. It's not. It's not better than the first. Nothing will ever be better than the first Hocus Pocus. But it's a cute film. It's cute. It's kitschy. It's a love story to the first one. And it has Doug Jones. So I'm not complaining. And I don't know why anybody would. Let's hope for a second one. And with that, for the comments down below, tell me who your favorite character is from Hocus Pocus 1. And if you don't talk to me about that, tell me who your favorite character is from Hocus Pocus 2. And if you don't talk to me about that, just talk to me about something, because I love for you to talk to me down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you come around again soon. Say bye. Bye!